This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV.
Sometimes the hardest truth isn't that people don't love you. It's that they've learned how to rely on you so completely that your absence feels totally unimaginable. But your exhaustion, it feels invisible. And somewhere along the way, being dependable quietly replaced being seen. Until the body starts telling a story the mouth never had time to finish.
It's Truthful Tuesday. No sugarcoating, no polite lies, just the kind of honesty that makes people nod slowly and rethink their life decisions. Let's talk about it. It's
Boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it.
Welcome to Ask Me and welcome to Truthful Tuesday, which is not about, I guess, courage in the dramatic sense or honesty that arrives wrapped in relief, but about the kind of truth that sits heavy in the chest because it's been lived quietly for a very long time without witnesses. This show exists for the moments people don't usually narrate, the seasons where responsibility becomes so normalized that no one thinks to ask how it's being carried, the stretches of life where being dependable slowly replaces being seen, until the two feel interchangeable and no one notices when the balance disappears. Truthful Tuesday, it isn't about calling anyone out or assigning blame in clean directions, because real life doesn't arrange itself that way. It's about noticing patterns that form when one person becomes the center of gravity for everyone and for their stability, and how that role, when left unnamed, slowly begins to cast or cost more than anyone acknowledges. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from overwork alone, but from being assumed, from being the one everyone knows will handle it, figure it out, make it work, keep going, and do the right thing, even when doing the right thing requires sacrificing rest and health and recognition and sometimes even identity. And the dangerous part of that exhaustion is how normal it feels at first, how it disguises itself as strength and reliability, love, or duty, until the body starts speaking up in ways that can't be ignored anymore. We don't talk enough about how families organize themselves around the most capable person in the room, not intentionally, not maliciously, but instinctively. And how once that structure is in place, it becomes hard to disrupt without being accused of selfishness, ingratitude, or abandonment. The truth is, being the one who holds everything together, that often means being the last one anyone thinks about when something finally breaks, because the assumption is that you will always do what you are doing until you don't. So this show isn't here to shame families or vilify partners or rewrite histories with villains and heroes. It's here to sit with the uncomfortable reality that love does not automatically equal awareness, and that people can benefit deeply from someone's presence while remaining largely unaware of the cost of that presence to the person providing it. So Truthful Tuesday, it asks us to look at the quiet imbalance that forms when one person's needs are consistently postponed in favor of everyone else's urgency, and how that postponement doesn't feel dramatic day to day. It feels practical and unnecessary. Nobody's making excuses, honey, and you're right. Life is definitely not easy. Thanks for your input. I appreciate you. So it feels practical and necessary, even responsible, right up until it becomes unsustainable. So there's also something, I guess, uniquely isolating about this kind of role because it rarely comes with validation, applause, or acknowledgement. It comes with silence and expectation and the steady hum of obligation. Hey, blessed sister. Good to see you, honey. How are you? So, the steady hum of obligation here. And when someone finally tries to speak up, the response they often receive is confusion or defensiveness, right? Rather than understanding. That response alone can make a person question their own reality, wondering if they're exaggerating, being ungrateful, or asking too much, even as their body begins to shut down from the weight of doing too much for too long, for too many. Ask of Me doesn't rush to solutions because rushing past the truth is often how people end up here in the first place. Skipping over their own signals in order to keep things functioning, keep the peace, keep the lights on, keep everyone else steady. Today's conversation lives in that space between capability and collapse, between love and resentment, or responsibility and erasure. And it asks a question that I think many people are really afraid to ask out loud, which is not whether they love their families, but whether their families still see them as human. There's a deep grief that comes with realizing you are essential to everyone else's life while feeling non essential in your own. And that grief, it doesn't announce itself loudly, okay? It settles in real quiet, showing up as fatigue or illness, sleep that doesn't restore, hunger that goes unanswered, and definitely dreams that get postponed. Indefinitely. Because there's always something more urgent to handle first. Truthful Tuesday is where we name that grief without turning it into a performance, where we acknowledge that being the strong one is not the same as being okay, and that endurance, while admirable, is not infinite. We also have to be honest about how hard it is to ask for recognition in systems that have grown accustomed to your silence. Because speaking up doesn't just require courage, it risks destabilizing arrangements that others depend on. And that risk alone keeps many people quiet for longer than they should be. So this show exists so that that kind of silence has somewhere to land, somewhere it doesn't need to be justified or explained away, somewhere it can be heard without being corrected. There is no tidy moral here and no promise that truth telling automatically fixes imbalance, but there is something powerful in naming reality accurately, in saying, this is heavy, this is too much, this is costing me more than I can afford, and letting that truth exist without immediately trying to manage everyone else's reactions. I know reactions are everything. We all know that. But you can't live by them. You can't make choices by them. You can't. So Truthful Tuesday reminds us that being loved does not always mean being protected. And being needed doesn't always mean being valued in the ways that sustain a person long term. And that distinction, it matters way more than we often admit. If you're listening today and you recognize yourself in this space, not as someone who wants to be rescued, but as someone who wants to be acknowledged while you're still standing, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. This is not about asking for permission. You don't have to have permission to matter. It's about reclaiming the reality that you already do. Even if the system around you hasn't adjusted to reflect that truth yet, Ask a Bee holds space for stories like this, not to fix them, not to wrap them up in a pretty little bow, and definitely just to witness them fully, okay? Because sometimes the most honest thing that you can do is stop pretending that the load is manageable and tell the truth about how heavy it becomes. Okay, so I do have a letter for us today. Let me check our chat here. What's up? Hey, thank God I'm very, very gay. Thank God you're very, very you. Okay? You be you, because that's loud here. Okay? Now, let me get back into this over here, because like I said, I do have us a letter today. If you are, I probably should have a little comment here about this is going to be an emotional letter today. Plain and simple. If you don't need tears today, then you might want to walk out the door. I'm gay. Hey, yay. I'm proud of you. You just speak your truth, honey. Speak your truth. That's allowed here. All right. So before we read this letter, I want to slow the room down just enough to remind you what Ask a Bee is actually doing here, because this is not a place where people come to be fixed or corrected or talk out what they feel or talked out of what they feel. I don't know. You know what? The gayest in the world, huh? You know, my daughter, she might argue that one because she thinks she is. And you know what? I'm proud of her. All right. So, it's a place where lived truth gets set down without interruption. Letters on this show are not case studies, and they are definitely not performances. They are moments where someone finally stops managing everyone else's comfort long enough to tell the truth as they experience it, even if that truth feels messy, unresolved, or hard to hear. Truthful Tuesday especially exists for stories that don't announce themselves as breaking points until long, long after the weight has become unbearable. Stories where responsibility piled up gradually, where being capable quietly turned into being indispensable, and where love and duty become so entangled that it's hard to tell where one ends and self-erasure begins. The person who wrote this letter is not asking to be rescued, and they are not looking for applause. They're asking something much simpler and much harder, which is whether the life they are holding together will ever turn around and see them clearly while they are still alive inside of it. This letter isn't about one argument or one bad season. It's about years of being the default, the reliable one, the one who figures it all out and absorbs the fallout and keeps going, even when their body starts sending them messages and warning signs that are easier for everyone else to ignore. And you listen. I want you to notice how much of this story lives in the background of ordinary life, in the errands, the appointments, the borrowed rides, the quiet sacrifices that never make it into family conversations because they're assumed rather than acknowledged. There is no villain being named here and no demand being made. Just a long-held exhaustion, finally finding language. And that matters because, exhaustion without language has a way of turning inward, settling into the body and becoming illness. despair or disappearance. This is the kind of truth that doesn't come out all at once. It leaks out slowly through details, through memory, through the quiet fear of what will happen if the person holding everything together finally can't. So, as we move into this letter, I'm asking you to listen without trying to fix it, okay? We're not here to do that. We're not professionals. Listen without deciding what advice you give and without measuring whether you would have done things differently. Because this moment isn't about solutions, it's about recognition. Sometimes the most important thing that we can do for a truth like this is to let it be fully heard. I'm sorry, this one's emotional. Without rushing it towards resolution. So it can finally exist in the open instead of being carried alone. I'm going to let this roll before I start bawling like a baby again because, yes, this one had to be bawling. And yes, I have an answer for this one. So I'm going to be bawling again, I'm sure. But y'all, you got to listen to this one. And let me just say before I put it on, God bless you. And I see you, my dear. I see you.
I'm an older woman and I'm exhausted from carrying something I don't know how to put down, and I need the truth instead of guessing anymore because I live every day for everyone else and there is no space in my family for me to exist as a person with needs. I have 3 grown children with partners of their own, and I watch how they love each other, how they prioritize one another, and I can't help feeling jealous because I remember when I mattered like that too, when I was significant to someone, and now everything I do feels like a chore that goes unnoticed no matter how much weight it carries. I'm not pretending I've been perfect in my life, but I have taken responsibility, I have made amends, and I have done far more than my share to make things right, even when others refuse to acknowledge the damage they caused alongside me. I am the reason my granddaughter is here, not because I want credit for her life, but because I believed when no one else would, because I followed my instinct when her paternity was questioned and she was left in an 8-month void, and I opened my home when others were too afraid to love her before certainty. I brought her here, gave her a room, made space until my son came home, and years later she is in my home nearly every day, thriving, loved, safe, and that belief should count for something. I take care of everyone, including those who don't live here, and now my husband, who has serious heart issues and other inherited illnesses, and I have taken over everything while my own health quietly deteriorates. We don't have a vehicle, haven't for over a year, and I've still kept the lights on, still managed food, appointments, medications, taxes on the house my mother left to my children, still held everything together without recognition or concern for the toll it's taking on my body. I have my own illnesses, stomach issues that can take me down completely, but I'm not allowed to be sick, so I take over the counters and push through while making sure my husband gets insulin, heart meds, blood thinners, medications he needs to stay alive, even though he refuses to see a doctor in person after a widowmaker heart attack and a stent placed in his heart. He plays games while I handle everything, forgets me when meals are done, overlooks my needs entirely, and becomes defensive when I try to talk about the imbalance. I don't expect him to do much, but I do expect him to fight for what life we have left together. I'm not eating, I'm barely sleeping, my body is starting to shut down, and I work 1 day a week in the elements because it's all I can manage, without a car. I rely on food pantries, online appointments, borrowed rides, and sheer willpower, and still no one asks if I'm okay or notices that I'm not physically well. I have dreams of my own, a project I've worked on for over a year that no one in my family pays no attention to, and they all know it exists, and I feel like I'm failing at everything simply because there is no support left for me. I am stuck in the middle of people who don't see me, don't hear me, and don't seem to understand what will happen when my body finally gives out under the weight of all this, and I'm scared because I know that if I keep going like this, I won't last much longer. I know one day I will disappear, I just want to be seen while I'm still here. Signed, wishing for 10 more years at least.
Just 10 more? Wow. Forgive me. I know quiet time online is bad time. But wow. I'm going to try and do this the best way that I can. This letter has gotten me. So, what I want to start with is something very simple, but yet very hard to hear at the same time, which is that nothing about what you describe sounds invisible because it isn't significant. It sounds invisible because it has become expected. And there's a difference that matters more than people realize. When a life gets organized around one person's reliability, their effort stops being noticed, not because it isn't meaningful, but because the system depends on pretending it is effortless. Because acknowledging the cost would require change. And change is uncomfortable for everyone who benefits from the way things are. You are not unseen, okay? Because you failed to matter. You are unseen because you have mattered so consistently that your presence has been folded into the background, treated like infrastructure, rather than a human being with limits. And that is a role that people rarely question until the structure starts to crack. What you're describing isn't jealousy of your children's relationship so much as grief for the version of yourself that once felt chosen rather than required, significant rather than useful. And that grief deserves to be named without being shamed. Because longing for recognition is not the same as demanding worship, okay? It's a basic human need to know what your existence registers with the people you sustain. The hardest part of being the one who does the right thing over and over again is that it quietly trains others to believe you will always do it, regardless of the cost to yourself. And over time, that expectation, it becomes entitlement without anyone ever meaning for it to. That doesn't make your family evil or heartless. No. But it does make the dynamic dangerous because it removes urgency from your suffering and replaces it with assumption. The assumption that you will manage, you will push through, you will figure it out because you always have. The truth you're circling isn't whether they will ever see you the way you see them. It's whether the version of you they rely on can survive long enough for that realization to matter. And that's where this stops being emotional and starts being existential. Okay? Pardon me, I told y'all, I warned you, because this one, I can relate. I'm just going to say that. Your body's not betraying you. Okay? It is telling the truth long before your circumstances have allowed you to. And the signals that you're describing, the lack of appetite, the exhaustion, the illness that no longer stays contained, they're not weaknesses. All of it, it's not weakness. They are evidence that you have exceeded a sustainable load for far too long without relief. There is a cruelty in systems that praise endurance while quietly punishing anyone who finally needs rest. And families can become systems like that without ever intending harm, because everyone is too focused on surviving to notice who is doing the most carrying. You're right that believing in your granddaughter mattered, not because you want credit, but because belief is an act of courage when certainty is withheld. And it speaks to a pattern in you that shows up everywhere in this letter, okay? which is that you step forward when others hesitate. You hold space when others protect themselves. And you do the emotional and logistical labor that allows other people to delay responsibility. That pattern is not a flaw. It does become dangerous when it is the only one operating. You're also telling a deeper truth about your marriage, one that is hard to sit with, which is that caretaking without partnership eventually turns into loneliness, even when another person is physically present. And that loneliness is intensified when your attempts to speak out about the imbalance are met with defensiveness rather than curiosity. And defensiveness is not the same as incapacity, but it often signals that the person being confronted senses a shift that would require them to change. And resistance is a way of keeping the ground from moving. What you're living inside of right now is not just exhaustion. It is the fear of being the only one who seems to understand how close the edge actually is. And that fear is isolating because it makes you feel responsible not only for holding things together, but for preventing everyone else from having to face the reality you are already living in. When you ask what will happen to them when your body gives out, that question isn't dramatic, it's practical. Unfortunately. And the fact that it has gone unanswered for so long is a huge part of the problem. Probably the biggest part of the problem. Look, Truthful Tuesday doesn't give you a script for how to get through to people who are invested in not hearing you, but it does name the reality that you cannot reason your way into being valued in systems that depend on your silence. And that recognition is painful because it means the work ahead is not about saying the right thing. It's about changing what you're willing to carry without acknowledgement. You are not asking for permission to collapse. You are asking for permission to be human. And the tragedy is that you shouldn't need permission for that at all. There's a quiet lie that lives in people like you, a belief that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, compassion will follow. But compassion doesn't automatically emerge from clarity when others are protected by your continued endurance. Sometimes the most honest truth is that people do not change because they understand. They change because the conditions that allowed them not to understand no longer exist. It really doesn't. It's just not there anymore. It's gone. But that's not a threat. It's a boundary formed by reality. What you're feeling right now is the cost of being indispensable in a world that does not pause to protect its pillars. And the fear underneath is not death itself, but disappearance. The sense that you could vanish under the weight and the system would only notice once something stopped working. And by the system, I do mean your family, those that depend on you. That fear deserves to be spoken out loud, though, not to scare anyone, but to honor how real it already is. You are not failing at your dreams because they lack value. You are failing to sustain them because there has been no space left for you to be more than what everyone else needs. And dreams can't grow in environments where survival takes precedence. Every single day. There's no shame in wanting 10 more years. There's no selfishness in wanting those years to be lived rather than endured. And the truth is that nothing changes unless the truth is allowed to disrupt the story everyone else has been telling themselves about how things are working just fine. This answer is not telling you to leave or to demand anything or to issue ultimatums, because Ascoby does not traffic in prescriptions, okay? But it is telling you something that matters deeply, which is that your life is already giving you information, and ignoring that information will not protect the people you love in the long run. You cannot save others by disappearing, and you cannot continue to be the foundation without being reinforced. And pretending otherwise is not love, it's erosion. If there is one thing I want you to hear clearly, it is that being needed is not the same as being cherished. And being relied upon is not the same as being cared for. And confusing those things is how people like you get lost in plain sight. You are not asking for too much. You are asking too late. And even that is not a moral failure. It is a consequence of having been trained to put yourself last for far too long. Listen, Truthful Tuesday doesn't promise that people will suddenly see you the way you deserve, but it does say this without hesitation. You are already important enough to notice that you are not well. The truth of that does not depend on anyone else's acknowledgement to be real. The weight you are carrying is not sustainable. And the fact that you can articulate that now is not a sign of weakness. It's the clearest form of strength that you have left, because it tells the truth before the body is forced to finish the sentence for you. Please understand that. Please understand that. Now, we know that, pardon me, trying to compose myself for a moment. Okay. I'm sorry, this one's hit me pretty hard. So, darn it, come on now. Sorry, I don't know why my thing is not working again. All right. Y'all know that I always have an answer for these, right? I gave the answer. But then I usually go in and I talk about an artist that can relate. And let me tell you, this letter has hit me so hard that I pulled out a big gun. I had to, because this is how much this means to me for this writer. And I hope that there'll be some understanding out of this artist, because it is rather important for somebody to understand that, things happen because we take on way too much weight for ourselves. And sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's not so quiet. Ladies, don't let this be quiet anymore. Men, if this is you, don't be quiet. Okay? This isn't isolated to one side. It can be either or. And all I'm saying is, your body's telling you something, and you need to listen. Lord knows, we all do. Okay? So, I'm going to bring out our artist of the day. This is going to be hard on me too, because let me tell you, this person I've followed my entire life, and no, they're not here anymore, for the very same reason as what you're going through, because of the weight of everything that you said you could handle, and then you just really couldn't. Okay, here we go. I chose Karen Carpenter, and I think we can understand why. So, Karen Carpenter's story makes people uncomfortable, not because it's traumatic, but because it is a familiar in a way that we don't like to admit, especially when we've built our lives around being the one who keeps everything steady and agreeable and, well, functioning while quietly disappearing underneath it. She wasn't loud about her limits. She didn't demand space. She didn't make chaos to be noticed. She showed up. She did the work. She sang the songs. She kept the machine running. And that reliability, it became the very thing that erased her. Because once a system learns that someone will carry the weight without complaint, it stops checking whether that weight is survivable. Karen was talented in a way that felt effortless to the people around her. And that illusion of ease is dangerous because when something looks natural, we stop asking what it costs. We stop listening for strain, and we stop noticing when the body is being overruled by obligation. She became the sound of comfort for millions of people while slowly losing permission to be uncomfortable herself. And that contradiction sits at the center of why her story still aches, because she was everywhere and nowhere at the same time, essential and overlooked in the same breath. What people often miss is that her struggle didn't come from wanting too much. It came from wanting too little for herself while giving everything away. And that kind of self erasure gets praised until it becomes impossible to reverse. Karen didn't grow up being told that her needs mattered as much as her usefulness. She grew up being valued for what she could provide, how she could harmonize, how she could support, how she could make things beautiful without asking for disruption. And then when that becomes the core of how you are loved, it's hard to believe that you are allowed to stop. Her body started telling the truth long before anyone wanted to hear it. But bodies are inconvenient narrators in families and systems that depend on continuity. So those signals get minimized and reframed, spiritualized, or ignored because acknowledging them would require slowing down, changing roles, redistributing responsibility. And no one ever wants to be the first to suggest that the person holding everything together might need to be held. There is something brutally honest about the way her illness progressed quietly alongside her success because it mirrors how many women learn to function through depletion, convincing themselves that pushing through is maturity and discipline or love, when it is often just the absence of permission to rest, which is hard, very hard. Hi, Patty friend. Oh man, I love Karen Carpenter. I did it. I got an award for a report I did on her in junior high because I was just, man, the woman. I can't believe the things that she went through, right? And thank you. I'm glad you like her. Kind of knew you would. And when I get some of this stuff, I think about that because I know you're going to watch me. I love you, Patty friend. I just hope you know that, honey. So, Karen was praised, right? For her voice, her softness, her steadiness, and none of those compliments required anyone to ask how she was doing as a person. Because admiration can be a substitute for care when people don't want to look too closely. The strategy, it isn't that no one loved her, it's that love never translated into protection. And that gap between affection and safety is where people disappear. She lived in a world that needed her to be consistent more than it needed her to be well. And that is a truth many people listening today recognize in their own lives, the quiet pressure to remain functional, because too many things would unravel if they stopped. Karen's struggle wasn't a rebellion against responsibility. It was the cost of carrying responsibility without relief, without recognition of limits, and definitely without a recalibration of expectations as her body changed. And that is why her story doesn't belong in the category of cautionary tales so much as mirror. At least that is for me. That's true for me. I'm not sure if that would be for everybody, but I think we get the gist of this because Karen Carpenter, she was amazing, and there was so much of her that she gave, and so much that nobody noticed because she gave enough not to notice. We do that to ourselves too. We make it easy for them to stop looking until we give them a reason to look. So she didn't fail to advocate for herself because she was weak. She failed because advocating for herself would have destabilized the very relationships and systems that gave her identity. And that is the terrifying trade-off of to face when your sense of worth has been built completely around being needed. There's a specific loneliness that comes with being indispensable because it leaves no room to be cared for without guilt. No space to rest without feeling like you are letting someone down. And no language for asking for help without feeling like you're betraying the role everyone depends on you to play. Pardon me. Oh, Texas, beautiful weather again today. I mean, yesterday I was in shorts. Today I'm in a sweater. I don't even know what the temperature is out right now. Oh, 58. I'll be out of the sweater in about 5 more minutes. So, yeah, I hate Texas weather so much. So, Karen's life shows us what happens when that loneliness goes unaddressed for far too long, and when the body becomes the only place left to express truth. When hunger, fatigue, and illness start speaking because the person has learned not to. The uncomfortable part of leaning into her story is recognizing that no one swooped in at the last moment to fix it. Not because they didn't care, but because the system had grown so accustomed to her endurance, and that collapse, it seemed unthinkable until it happened. That's the part people don't like to sit with. The idea that love without boundaries can still be lethal. That admiration without accountability can still erase someone, or that being good and reliable and self-sacrificing does not guarantee protection. Karen Carpenter didn't disappear because she wasn't loved enough. She disappeared because she was loved in ways that never asked her to be fully human, never made room for her to stop performing stability, and really never insisted that her well-being mattered as much as her contribution. And that truth lands hard for anyone who recognizes themselves in the role of the quiet backbone, the one who keeps the lights on, keeps the peace, keeps everyone else afloat while their own body starts to slip under the surface. The first part of the story isn't about blame or hindsight or what should have been done differently. It's really about naming the danger of being too good at holding things together, about understanding that when a life is organized around your reliability, your suffering becomes inconvenient to acknowledge. Karen's story doesn't ask us to mourn her as an icon. It asks us to look honestly at how many people are still living this pattern in real time, still telling themselves they can push through a little longer, still waiting to be seen while quietly disappearing. And that recognition is not meant to scare you. It's meant to tell the truth that endurance without support is not strength, it's erosion. And erosion never announces itself loudly until there is a very little left to save. So, what deepens the ache in this story is how quietly the warning signs were normalized. Because when someone is known for being steady, their struggle often gets reinterpreted as a phase, a mood, or something private they'll manage on their own. And that reinterpretation allows everyone else to keep moving without interpretation or interruption, pardon me. In Karen's world, the expectations placed on her weren't always spoken loud, which makes them harder to challenge because unspoken expectations feel like reality rather than choice. And reality doesn't get questioned as easily. She was expected to show up, to sound a certain way, to be dependable, to not rock the emotional boat. And over time, that expectation hardened into identity until being anything other than reliable felt like a personal failure rather than, I guess, a necessary adjustment. So, what people often overlook is how much restraint it takes to remain agreeable when your inner life is unraveling. I mean, how much energy it requires to keep meeting needs while your own signals are quietly dismissed, and how dangerous it becomes when self denial starts masquerading as virtue. That's a big one on me. The world praised her softness, her composure, her lack of drama, without recognizing that those qualities were also survival strategies in an environment that didn't make room for mess or anger or refusal. And you know what? Once those strategies are rewarded, they become difficult to abandon, even when they are no longer safe. There's particular cruelty in being valued for calm while living in distress because it teaches you that expressing pain risks losing the very acceptance you depend on, and that fear alone can keep someone silent for longer than their body can sustain. As her health declined, the response around her, it didn't always look like neglect. It looked like confusion, minimization, and a quiet hope that things would stabilize on their own. Because acknowledging the severity would have required a collective reckoning with how much had been asked of her without adequate care. Families and systems often respond this way, not out of malice, but out of self protection, because confronting the cost to someone's sacrifice forces everyone to confront their own dependency on it. Karen's struggles exposes how easily concern gets delayed when a person has been functioning for so long, because functionality becomes the metric for wellness. And as long as the work continues, the suffering feels theoretical rather than urgent. Patty says, I remember when I finally figured out she was falling apart silently. I felt she was used and tossed aside. Yes, I have to agree with you there. And if anybody's ever read the book, seen the movie, you can see that in there too. And I think it was probably more prominent than well than they told us in the movie or in the books or whatever, because I don't know, they kept pushing her knowing she was sick. It wasn't like they didn't know what was going on. It was like they knew, but they also knew what finding out what it was going to cost them. Because it wasn't about her, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to her family, at least her parents. I believe her parents were more concerned about themselves. I don't think her brother was as concerned about himself. I did a lot of research on this one. I'm sorry. But I agree. I absolutely agree. I really felt like she was used and tossed out. And when they finally did realize what was going on, it was just too late. It was just too late. And well, no, not when they found out. I'm gonna rephrase that, because it's not when they found out, because they found out early. But when they finally decided that it was important enough, that's when they should have done something, and they didn't. In all fairness, no one knew what to do with eating disorders back then. No, you're right about that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I think as parents too, we try and we push a little bit with, and we overlook those things, especially when our kids become adults. We're like, okay, well, they got this now. They're adults, but they really don't. Some of them. And, like I've been saying, this was not with malice. This was not, you're right. They didn't understand that. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this at this point, because I'm trying to put my ADHD aside on this one. Forgive me. They knew, but they didn't know how to handle it. They didn't. She also said, no, I'm okay. No, it's okay. Let's do this. That's what this is partially about. It's about the programming that we do to our own detriment here. I know we've all had that situation where you go into a relationship or into something that you're trying to impress, and you act like the person that you think they want you to be, not the person that you actually are. And then you get caught up in that person that they think you are, and you have to keep that role going. And then once you finally get past all that, well, that's when it starts to hurt you. Sure, it helped you in the beginning because now they just absolutely adore you for what you do. But they also realize that you've done all this without complaint, without showing that something's wrong with you, or, without considering yourself. Selflessness has its cost too, I feel, in a lot of ways. I have to say, and I can relate a lot to this, to our letter writer, to Karen. Everybody goes through their stuff. And yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and take me a break real quick, because yes, Patty friend, my Catahoula is doing the pee-pee dance. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my break just a tad bit early, take care of him, and we'll be back to finish this story, because y'all, I love me some Karen Carpenter. This woman was amazing, and I will go down for the rest of my life praising her because of her strength. It took a lot of strength for her to do what she did, and I hate that she's gone. But here we go. I'm going to get you a break, get this cool song going. Love y'all. Be right back.
She came from the quiet storms, built a fire from the ground, turned a whisper to a warning. Now her voice shakes the town. Every setback was a lesson, every doubt whole damn network off a promise and a try. Every sunrise, every moment, she's stacking legacy. This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV. A boss be rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's the queen of the comeback, the storm in the stream, crafting stories out of heartbeats, making visions out of dreams. Got thunder in the hustle, got a voice that cuts clean. Every mic she touches turns the power unseen. So let further spin the numbers, let the views rise slow or fast. Boss Beat doesn't measure wins by echoes of the past. This moment is a pivot, this season's history. Bow down to the founder of the BBTV dynasty. Boss be rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's got fire in the head, it's got truth in the frame. Got a heart that won't retire and a gift you can't name. Every loop, every letter, every dream she sets free. It's a love note to the world sign, Boss Beat. And the world keeps watching as the numbers climb, but she's counting all the moments, not the dollar signs. From the late night grind to the daylight scene, she's building something bigger than the algorithm's dream. Boss be rising, BBTV shining. Her story's rewriting, a legacy in real time. Boss be rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dreams, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. BBTV, where the stories breathe. BBTV, where the dreamers believe. Boss be rising, watch her take her place. This is BBTV, this is her grace.
Join Boss B for Ask a Bee Monday through Friday, 12 noon Central Standard Time and Jukebox Journey every Saturday, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time.
All right, we are back. Thank you. My dog thanks you. He's a big boy. He's an old boy, and he got to go. He got to go, right? All right. So, to get back to Karen. So I think her story shows us how bodies become the final boundary when no other boundary is allowed to exist, and how illness steps in as a form of truth telling, when words have been trained into silence. And now, how frightening it is to realize that collapse can happen in plain sight without anyone knowing how close it really is. This isn't about hindsight judgment or assigning blame. It's about recognizing the patterns that repeat themselves in homes, in families, and workplaces, everywhere, where the most responsible person is giving the least protection because everyone assumes they can handle it. The strategy here isn't suddenness, it's duration. The strength of time, or pardon me, the length of time she carried expectations that never adjusted as her capacity changed, the way her humanity became secondary to her role, and how difficult it is to reclaim personhood once usefulness has become the primary currency of love. There's an especially painful truth in how care often arrives too late. Not because people didn't care, but because they didn't understand that care needed to look like intervention rather than admiration. And, I think, I guess, redistribution rather than reassurance. Karen's life asks an uncomfortable question that many people avoid, which is what happens when being good becomes dangerous, when, self control becomes self erasure and endurance is mistaken for strength long past the point where it is actually survival. So, this segment of the story doesn't offer answers or lessons. It simply holds the reality that being valued for what you provide can slowly eclipse being valued for who you are. And that eclipse can happen without anyone intending harm. It reminds us that responsibility without relief is not noble forever. That restraint without recognition becomes isolation. And that silence is often not peace, but a signal that someone has learned it is safer not to speak. Not true. The weight of this story isn't meant to overwhelm here. It isn't meant to clarify anything either, because once you see how easily a life can be organized around someone's capacity rather than their well being, it becomes harder to ignore the quiet ways that same pattern shows up elsewhere. Still unfolding, still unresolved, still asking to be noticed before the body is forced to finish the sentence on its own. And it will. And there's nothing you can do about it, as such in Karen's case. And again, there's no blame here. So, what makes this story so difficult to sit with, especially for me, is that there was no single moment where everything went wrong. No dramatic fracture that could have forced attention or demand intervention. Just a slow accumulation of small permissions given away until there was very little left to protect. Karen's life shows how easily a person can lose authority over their own limits when they've been praised for not having any. And now, how that praise becomes a quiet contract that says your value lives in what you can endure rather than in what you need. Over time, endurance becomes a language everyone else speaks fluently on your behalf, interpreting your silence as consent, your continued presence as capacity, your compliance as well-being, even when the cost is clearly mounting. This is where the pattern becomes especially dangerous, because once people grow accustomed to your reliability, any disruption feels like betrayal rather than information. And that fear alone can keep someone pushing past all these signals they should be listening to. Karen didn't lack awareness of her own suffering. She lacked permission to prioritize it without unraveling the world around her. And that distinction matters because it reframes the story away from personal failure and towards systemic neglect. The world around her continued to function smoothly because she absorbed the strain. And when that happens long enough, the strain becomes invisible to everyone except the body carrying it. There's a quiet violence in that invisibility, not the kind that leaves marks you can, you know, point to, but the kind that slowly convinces a person that their pain is less important than the comfort of those who depend on them. Her story reveals how easily people confuse gratitude with care, how appreciation can replace protection, and admiration can stand in for responsibility when no one wants to disrupt a functioning arrangement. The body in these situations, it becomes the last place truth can surface because words have been trained to soften, to defer, to reassure. And when the body speaks, it does so without concern for timing. There's no internal chronometer. We're not data, for all my Star Trek fans. Convenience or the feelings of others, okay? There's nothing there for that. Karen's decline, it wasn't a sudden loss of control. It was the inevitable outcome of a life spent overriding herself in order to remain acceptable and useful, and the way she felt in order to remain loved. And that is a reality many people, well, they don't want to confront because it implicates not just individuals, but entire systems of expectation. Quiet expectation that just completely unravels you. So this part of the story, it focuses on acknowledgement. Now often we rely on the most capable people to absorb what they should or what should be shared, and how rarely we check in on them unless something visibly breaks. It also exposes the myth that being needed is the same as being insecure, because need can vanish the moment capacity does, right? Leaving the person who carried everything wondering who they are without the role that defined them. Karen's experience challenges the idea that goodness protects you, that compliance earns safety, that doing the right thing guarantees care, because none of those beliefs hold up when responsibility is allowed to accumulate without relief. Her brother probably had a super hard time dealing with it, guilt and loneliness. Oh my gosh, you're so true. That's so true. I can't imagine. I mean, they should have, as close as they were, they could have been twins, right? And yeah, him being the older brother too, that's got to be hard. There were so many factors there. I can't imagine how he dealt with those things. And I don't know about him or anybody else, but personally, had I known her, I think I would probably carry a lot of guilt along with me for not, stepping up, for not being exactly what she needed me to be at that very moment. But then the story goes, how could you know? Right? How could you know? Because she hid it well too. That is something you can hide very well. And she was very tiny in the beginning anyway, so it showing in her face, and her eyes got a little gaunt, I guess, at the end. You can see in some of the pictures in the video, which I should probably restart again. But by the time that we reach the end of this story, the question is no longer what went wrong, but why so many people are surprised when a life built on quiet sacrifice eventually gives out. Because nothing about this pattern is sudden once you learn how to see it. But nobody knew how to see it. And to Patty's point, yes, nobody knew what to look for at that time. And honestly, just like everything else, it evolves. Does anybody know how to look for that now? I mean, you can listen, you can pay attention, but how often do people really pay attention? You know, our letter writer today, well, I'll just say this letter writer is very close to me. And I wish someone other than me would open their eyes to her situation, because I feel very, very scared for her. And I'm just one person. There's not much I can do where I'm at because I have very similar situation. But yeah, this is hard on me because I know what this person's going through right now. I do very much know what this person is going through. And I feel like this person has probably been pushed to the bottom of the barrel and does not know a way to get out of it. And honestly, personally, I can give advice, but I'm never going to say it's good enough because I haven't gotten on the other side of that kind of situation before. So I don't know. I can offer, my time, my space, but how much of that is worth it? This one hit me hard, y'all. This one hit me hard. So, yeah, I've gone off on this one a little bit, but I think we can recognize some of ourselves in some of this too, because, like I was saying before, we have this. When we're first meeting somebody or first trying to impress someone, even if it's family, whatever, when we have all these responsibilities, there are times that we push everything that's important aside for that one situation, and we put this mask on. And when you show somebody that mask, they expect to see that mask from here on out. And that's one of our biggest mistakes, I feel, is because we train ourselves to be that person. We train ourselves to push our needs aside for others. And we train ourselves to ignore the fact that sometimes it takes a letter like this to get you to wake up to your own. So that's why I went ahead with this letter today. Who knows? I just want to tell the writer of this letter that you're seen, you're loved, and please take care of yourself physically. I don't care about any other way at this point. Take care of yourself physically and stop putting it off. And understand that there's always going to be somebody in your life that doesn't understand. And if you can't make them understand, then you're just going to have to take your own understanding into account and be responsible for it, because some people never change. They don't. It's a harsh reality, but some people never change. Some people do. And, there is hope. There's always hope. I'm never going to say that there's not, okay? People can change. I've seen people that are not good people at all. Not at all. completely changed from day to night. Seriously. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this one here, because if not, then I'm going to be up here for another hour on this one. And I'm already an hour and 15 minutes in, but that's okay, because this needed to be said. This needed to be brought out. If you are the center of your family, if you are feeling like you're underappreciated, and not cared for, if you feel the imbalance, speak up for yourself. Don't let it take its toll on your body. These people will not make it without you, because they don't know how to be as strong as you. Okay? You need to take that strength, and instead of using it to push your own needs away, you need to take that strength and push yourself out there to the point where you can take care of yourself without question. And if it takes pissing a few people off, then do it. But stop neglecting yourself. I don't care what else you do in life. Stop neglecting yourself. Don't become this story today, okay? Take care of yourself. And if nobody else wants to care, it's because they don't understand. And if you can't explain it, then honey, take care of yourself until you can, okay? Because you don't have to do it overnight, but you do have to stop neglecting yourself. All right, we're going to leave this here without trying to resolve it, because I'm going to start bawling, and not neatly. Some truths aren't meant to be wrapped up, though, okay? They're meant to be noticed while there's still time to respond to them differently. If today stirred something in you, not panic, but awareness, not guilt, but recognition, then this conversation did what it was meant to do. Askaby isn't here to tell you what to do next or how to fix what feels heavy. It's here to sit with the truth long enough that it stops being ignored. Sometimes that's enough for one day, to be seen, to be steady, and to know you're not alone in carrying what you've been carrying. We'll pick this back up tomorrow for What the Fork Wednesday, and boy, we have a doozy. Thank you, honey. I love you so much, Patty. You take care. We will see you soon. Here's a little bit of promo going on, because I've got to shout out my besties. Tuber Chat, and forgive me, I will fix that, but it is Tuber Chat. Okay? Love y'all.
Before we roll on, I want to take a second to shout out Tuber Chat, because once again they showed up and held space the way real community does. This channel isn't about noise or numbers chasing, it's about consistency, respect, and actually supporting creators without strings attached. That matters more than people realize. If you're looking for a place that lifts voices instead of talking over them, Tuber Chat is that lane. I appreciate the time, the encouragement, and the steady presence more than I can properly wrap into words. So much love to the Tuber Chat crew for doing what you do and doing it the right way.
If you're enjoying this show, subscribing is the easiest way to support what's being built here on BBTV. You'll see the join button right next to subscribe. No pressure, no expectations, just an option for people who want to support the channel in a real way. We're live weekdays at 12 p.m. Central, and each day has its own focus. Same honesty, same voice, just different conversations depending on the day. And if you've got a story you want to share, send it in. Anonymous is always fine.